Yep.
These are
Absolutely.
more people.
Yeah, we can watch it. Everybody's outside enjoying everything today. That's the thing.
Could have been bad.
All right.
Tell you what, I'm gonna give it just a couple more minutes here because I know there were like 30, 40 people signed up, but it's such a beautiful day outside, so completely understandable. Y'all enjoyed today?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think we hit 80, 81 degrees today, 82 degrees yesterday. It's February, what's going on? So, it's amazing. So, what?
Weather.
What's going on with weather? Y'all can come on in. So, cool. I'm gonna give it, so are we live now?
You are.
We are live now. Hey everybody that's at home or are watching on their phones, appreciate you guys joining in as well. So we're going to give it just a couple more minutes because I know there might be one or two that may walk in, but if not, we are going to get started here. So cool. All from Chattanooga? Cool.
No, I'm from Mississippi.
Mississippi? Yeah, my dad's in the audience too, so say hi, Dad. So, cool. Well, I tell you what, since we got people watching at home, y'all are here too, we'll go ahead and get started and as more folks walk in. So, well, I'd say welcome to everybody. So my name is Brian Smith and that is me right there back in my professional days when I was doing a little bit of television. Y'all come in. And so I used to work at News Channel 9. But I do have a meteorology degree from Mississippi State University, so once a meteorologist, always a meteorologist, but I did about 20 years in television, from working a little bit in Mississippi to Minnesota to several years here in Chattanooga. But my passion, I love weather. I used to do storm chasing years ago. I've been through several different storms here in the Chattanooga area as well as all across the country. And just about 6 months ago, I decided to leave television and join Chattanooga Parks and Outdoors because my second passion is being outside, being in the outdoors. But when I got here, Outdoor Chattanooga asked me to come and talk a little bit about severe weather safety. And we're doing it this week because this is also Severe Weather Awareness Week in the state of Tennessee. So it's very important to learn about severe weather, not only just in general, but also while we're camping and while we are hiking. Just also got back from a recent trip to Antarctica. Literally got back yesterday afternoon. So at the end, I'm going to share a couple pictures of that, a couple things I learned, and then over the next maybe a couple weeks, I might have another presentation. But that is me right there. I'm going to kind of get started into what is meteorology. And so we have a big, long definition called the branch of science concerning what the processes and phenomenon of the atmosphere, yada, yada, yada. Basically, meteorology is the study of weather. And we've been, of course, studying weather for a very long time. This guy right here, Aristotle, was one of the very first people to ever study meteorology. As a matter of fact, he wrote the very first book about meteorology. And he called that book Meteorologica, meaning things falling from the sky. So you can basically guess where we got the word meteorology from. But there was a problem with Aristotle back then because he only had a small area where he would do his study. So he couldn't figure out what was going on in other parts of the country or other parts of the world. Plus also, everything that he was trying to study was falling from way up into the sky. But he did a pretty good job writing the very first book. And then we go into Galileo and some other folks that have studied weather throughout the time. But really, meteorology is kind of a new science, especially when it comes to our technology. Back in the 60s, and we were sending up satellites, and we just recently put up some more satellites over the last 10 years or so that gives us a much better idea of how the weather works. And when you really think about it, I think satellites are probably one of the best inventions we ever had when it came to meteorology, because then we could take pictures of what is going on. We could tell people where these clouds are moving, where storms are going, where hurricanes are forming, and where they're going to land. So satellite was a pretty good invention. And of course we get into television, green screen, and probably one of the last things is here, and that's sort of 3D radar imagery. And we call this dual pole radar imagery. And we can scan now storms and get information from inside those storms in just a matter of minutes. And the reason why this is up in 3D is now we have a chance to see how tall some of these storms are, what's inside some of these storms, whether it's large hail, strong winds, debris, as well, of course, as heavy rain and lightning. All that can be detected inside a radar, including a tornado. And one of the newest things that we've been able to see within the last several years is able to see debris on a radar. So sometimes you'll see where there's a tornado warning, and you might not really know if there's a tornado associated with it or not. But now you can scan and you can see what are called debris balls on radar, and that gives you a much better idea of where some of that debris is, and you know for sure that a tornado is coming. So how do we forecast? Well, every day the National Weather Service will release a balloon, and that balloon will go up into the sky and measure data, starting here at the surface all the way up to about 15 to almost 20,000 feet. And every little segment there gives us an idea of what the temperature is, the wind speed, humidity, so on and so forth. And all that data is transferred back to big mega computers that are in North Carolina that end up developing images that look like this. And that's kind of what I went to school for, to be able to see what some of those images are. But through technology and plenty of other websites, they make images look a lot easier. And this is a lot of what you see posted on social media sites, or sometimes what we'll put on our graphics. And you kind of guess what that green is. And it's the rain. In this case here, this was a hurricane that spun through, and a little front that came through. So we go in and we look at these models every single day. Some of these models will come out every 15 minutes. Some will come out once or twice a day. The ones that come out every 15 minutes do so up to about 12 hours. This one here, which is called the GFS model, goes out to about 14 days, sometimes 28 days. But you kind of look at some of these models with a grain of salt, because after 10, 12 days, they're not quite as accurate. But you sort of look at the long-range models that get trends. When you think a storm system's coming through, or if it's going to turn colder, or it's going to turn warmer. Not for the exact details, but it gives you ideas. So we look at those every day, and that's where we come up with the forecast. But of course, here in Tennessee, we have all kinds of dangerous weather, including all these elements you see here on the screen. Tornadoes, lightning, damaging winds, large hail, and flash flooding. Matter of fact, I'm going to ask you guys, except for my daughter, what do you think is the #1 severe weather killer that we have here in the United States and in the state of Tennessee? Y'all want to guess? Heat. Heat is not #1. Especially here in Tennessee, because we're a little bit more used to it. Anybody else want to take a guess? What kind of severe weather hurts or kills more people than anything else out there? Tornadoes. Tornadoes is not #1 on the list. Addie, what is it? Flash floods. Flooding is #1 on the list. Hurts and kills more people than any other type of severe weather that we have here in Tennessee. And then we have lightning and tornado. These two will kind of go back and forth with fatalities or injuries. Yes, lightning still strikes people. Yes, lightning still hurts people. And of course, we all know we still have tornadoes. Matter of fact, Tennessee leads the country in nighttime tornadoes more than any other state in the entire country here. And then last, we have strong storms and hurricanes. Now, I'm not going to talk a lot about hurricanes because obviously we don't have those here. But a lot of people will ask, well, how can hurricanes be one of the last things on the list, even though they're the biggest and strongest storms that we have on the planet? And one of the reasons why is because hurricanes, we know days in advance before a hurricane comes, and we can tell people to evacuate. Not everybody listens, but we know, we have a good idea that it's coming towards Florida or South Carolina, and a lot of people will evacuate to here. But the #1 reason why flooding is so dangerous here in the United States is because of this. What are they doing? Driving through a flooded roadway. Is that a good idea? No, but every time we have flooding, we always have folks that are trying to drive through. And there are some chances that you can make it through. And that's the thing. We'll see someone driving through it, they made it through, and the next person tries to drive. Matter of fact, police will put up roadblocks, and people will drive around those roadblocks just so that they can make it to their destination. And not realizing how deep or dangerous that water could be. So here's a couple stats here for you. Hurts more people than any other type of severe weather, and it only takes about 6 inches of fast-moving water to knock you off your feet. That's not very deep. So let's say you've got some still water out there and it's only that deep, you can walk through it. But if that water is rushing quickly over the road, it only takes about that much to knock you down. Could you get back up? Maybe. But what if it knocked you down into a ditch that was a little bit deeper? And the next thing you know, you end up being stuck. And here is pretty staggering. It only takes about 2 feet of water fast-moving water to move your car. Now that varies. Sometimes you can have a bigger, heavier car, and it might take a little bit more. But most people don't realize when they're driving into that flooded roadway how deep that water is or how fast that water is moving. Next thing you know, you drive into it, you're stuck, your car starts moving, and really once you're stuck in that car and there's water all around you, you can't just hop out of the car and walk to safety. You're sort of stuck. And that becomes very problematic. And that's one of the main reasons why people end up losing their lives or having to be rescued. And I always kind of tell people when you're trying to be rescued, you're also putting not only yourself in danger, but the rescuer in danger as well. So I tell people all the time, turn around, don't drown. Next picture here, this came out of North Georgia. This is a kid that was walking with one of his friends, and it rained one afternoon. We had one of those big old summer storms that a little creek became almost like a big river. Now they weren't really swimming in that river, but what they were doing is they were kind of walking along, playing in it, and this young man tripped and fell into that creek. And next thing you know, he started getting swept away, and the only thing he could do was hold on to a tree. Now, lucky for him, he has a friend that ran and called 911, and that was one of the first police officers there to walk out there and rescue that young man. Now, this has happened in Chattanooga before, and I tell people there's an unfortunate story behind the Cromwell Apartments near the Tennessee Railroad Museum, if you guys have ever been over there. There's an apartment complex there that after a really heavy rain one afternoon, water came up like this, and there were two cousins that went out there and were kind of playing in the water, not realizing how deep that water was or how fast that water was moving, and unfortunately, they both lost their lives. That was several years ago, but does happen here in Chattanooga. Now, when it comes to camping and hiking, I always tell everybody this is going to be the thing for every time you go camping is checking that forecast. One of the things that we have here in Tennessee is, especially in the summertime, are isolated thunderstorms. They will pop up and can drop anywhere from 1/2 inch to 5 inches on one afternoon. And it might be 5 inches here in Chattanooga or Coolidge Park, but then Red Bank sees nothing. So those isolated storms can be dangerous. So making sure that we evacuate early, not necessarily waiting for that to come to you. You want to make sure that you are prepared when you see a dangerous storm like that or heavy rain coming, that you have a way to get out and evacuate. Also too, some of these are kind of obvious. If there's storms in the forecast, you're not wanting to pitch your tent there at the bottom of the ravine or a ditch, and you don't want to be in that danger zone, okay? And the last thing here is you also don't want to pitch your tent at the very top of a hill either. Anybody know a reason why you don't want to pitch your tent at the top of the hill during a storm? Because of what?
Wind and lightning.
Because of this, lightning. So here's a little video I put together, some lightning strikes, and all right, that happened. Lightning is actually one of my favorite things because lightning can be very beautiful. I've seen it all different colors. I've seen it purple. I've seen lightning kind of bluish, pinkish. I've seen lightning scatter all across the sky. I've seen lightning from, when I was out in Kansas and Oklahoma, just seeing it from miles away. Absolutely beautiful. But we all know too, lightning can be very dangerous. How about that big one sitting around there? So lightning can be dangerous, but yet people are still being hit by lightning all the time, unfortunately. Now, you can be struck even if the storm is just a few miles away. Lightning can be up to 50,000 degrees. Think about it, it's what, 80 degrees outside? Think about 50,000 degrees. Automatically, it can kill you in an instant. It can run through you pretty quickly. There are people that survive lightning strikes. Lightning is also static electricity. So when you guys are, especially in the wintertime, it's real dry, you're shuffling your feet across the carpet, and you go to touch that doorknob and it shocks you, that's static electricity. Well, lightning does the same thing. The clouds are moving around, generating some of that electricity, and as soon as it looks something to make contact with, hits that tree, hits that pole, hits you, it creates one gigantic bolt of static electricity. Now let me ask you guys this. Can you have thunder even though you don't see lightning? Yeah? Actually,
wait. If you don't see it or if it isn't there?
Like you can hear thunder out there, like I didn't see any lightning, but I hear thunder. Can you have lightning? Can you have thunder but not have lightning? Ooh, like heat lightning or dry lightning? I'm gonna go back to that in a second. Okay, so the answer to that is no. So I tell people, even though you hear thunder, but you don't see lightning, there is still lightning somewhere that is close by. So, because what happens, yes, you'll have cloud-to-cloud lightning, you'll have cloud-to-ground lightning, cloud within cloud lightning. But what happens is lightning, because it is so hot, when it comes out, it heats up the air and it expands the air. And as it expands the air, it heats it up and expands it. When the lightning goes away, that air collapses really quickly. When that air collapses, that's when you hear that thunder. So even though you don't see it, that phenomenon is still going on. Now, to reverse that question, can you have lightning but not have thunder? Kind of. There you go. So, first and foremost, how many of you guys heard of heat lightning? All right. I'll blow your minds. No such thing. That does not exist. There is absolutely no such thing as heat lightning. So even though we heard about it, and especially in the summertime around here, we'll have an isolated storm that's way off in the distance, and it's lightning after a really hot day. Because it is so far away, you do not hear the thunder. But light travels faster than the sound. So you will hear the flash, but you may never hear that thunder. It's not that it's heat lightning, it's just a storm that's really far away. So there is no such thing as heat lightning. So one of the first things to know is when you hear thunder, you go inside. One of the main reasons why people still get struck by lightning or maybe get real close to lightning is because we are stubborn. We'll hear thunder, we're sitting outside, we don't want to go inside, we're mowing the grass, we're playing a game, we're still outside running and hiking, and we wait to the last minute. And lots of times we'll wait until it starts raining, and then by that time we decide to go in. Well, by the time it starts raining, that storm is right above your head, which increases the chances of you or something next to you getting struck by lightning. Okay? So you don't want to be, next to something like this. This is called a bolt out of the blue. You have the storm that's here, the rain is over here, and all of a sudden this goes across the sky and then comes down and hits something. So there are many times where, especially here in the summertime, you might look up and there's a blue sky, storm's way over there, all of a sudden lightning hits something right here. That's called a bolt out of the blue. This happens in Florida a lot. By the way, Florida leads the country in lightning fatalities and lightning injuries. And we sometimes think that number is even higher because it doesn't get reported as lightning injuries, it gets lightning fatalities. So that number's kind of gone down because we've got great hospitals in response, but still there are lightning injuries. Okay? And actually, you know who the number one person is that gets struck by lightning, what they're doing more than anything else? What do you think? Golfing. Golfing is number one, yes. And it's not because you're holding a big metal golf club, it's because you're in a big wide open field. Golf's expensive. We don't want to stop playing golf because of a measly little storm close by. So golfers, and then you have boaters and farmers and roofers that will follow after that. Okay? So here's a little video, a little bit close here. Uh-oh. Doesn't look like that wants to play. All right, so here's a couple of little examples here. Lightning, what it likes to do is it likes to hit the top part of a tree. So lots of times when people think lightning hits a tree, that tree just catches on fire or explodes. Sometimes it does do that, but in most cases, lightning will hit the top of the tree and go all the way down the tree trunk. So if you're standing underneath that tree, you think you're going to get hit by lightning? Of course. So that's why we tell people obviously not to stand underneath a tree or the tallest object. Because what lightning likes to do, it'll travel on the outside of objects. So it'll hit the top of that tree, it'll go all the way down that tree trunk. So if you're standing next to it, there's a pretty good chance you'll get hit. Now, if there's water on the ground because it has been raining, lightning can hit the ground, travel along the ground, and still possibly hit you. So even being close to some of these objects. So being inside of your car, being inside of a building, places like that will help keep you away from lightning. Now, the number one reason why being inside of a car is safe is because of what?
Rubber.
What else? The tires? Nope, has nothing to do with the tires.
What?
Yeah, has nothing to do with tires. Being inside of a car is safe because lightning travels on the outside of objects. So if lightning were to hit your car, it's going to go on the outside of your car, hit the ground, and then turn off. So as long as you're inside your car, you're not sticking your hand outside the window, you are actually going to be safe from lightning. Okay? All right. Now, can lightning hit the ground? There's you a golf course. Yes, it can. Usually it likes to hit the tops objects, but sometimes it can hit the ground. Can lightning strike the same place twice? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sears Tower, Empire State Building get hit by lightning hundreds of times every single year. Okay? So when it comes to lightning safety while you're camping, right here is number one. Move away from that tall tree, that lone pole. You don't want to be next to that. Okay? Actually, it's pretty safe to be inside of a group of trees. Not the tallest out there, but if you can be inside a densely area of a group of trees, that decreases the chances of you or something next to you getting hit by lightning. Okay? Obviously, you want to move away from all high points. You don't want to be on top of a mountain anywhere during some of these storms. You want to come down from that ridge, come down from that mountain. Okay? Obviously, you want to stay away from bodies of water. And if there's a lot of lightning out of here, you want to keep out of shallow caves too. So you're kind of walk into a shallow cave, lightning can still hit something next to you and possibly still make it into where that shallow cave is. We have a lot of those around here in Chattanooga, but if you get deeper inside that cave, then chances are you're going to be okay. And right here it says insulate yourself with your pack or a sleeping pad, sitting on top of that. So what I mean by that is that you could be inside of your tent in that densely area of trees. If you're sitting on top of your sleeping pad or your bag, you're sort of insulating yourself on the ground. So by just, if there's a chance lightning were to hit something and roll along the water that might be next to your tent, if you insulate yourself, it decreases the chances of that lightning strike or that current making it to you. So there's a couple of little tips there when it comes to lightning safety. Now, I know some of you guys probably got some questions, and I'll answer some of those afterwards too, by the way. I meant to say that. All right, now we're going to talk about these guys. Now, when it comes to tornadoes, I think we all know if there's a tornado coming, we need to find some safe places to hide. There's a wide variety of tornadoes that we have here in Chattanooga, in Tennessee, all across the country. Matter of fact, every single state in the United States has had a tornado. The last state to finally have a tornado was Utah about 10, 15 years ago, where a tornado hit Salt Lake City, of all places. The entire state ago, they decided to hit Salt Lake City. Some of them are big, some are small, some can be obviously ripping up things, some can be very, non-noticeable out in the field. Some can last a matter of a couple of seconds, some can last and be on the ground for hours. Okay? So tornadoes, all different sizes that are out there. Now, when it comes to tornadoes, we have about 1,200 tornadoes every single year in the state of Tennessee. Some years, that's average. Some years we have more, some years we have less. Actually, I'm sorry, in the United States. In the state of Tennessee, we average about 20 to 30 tornadoes. So last year we had hardly any tornadoes whatsoever in the state of Tennessee. All of a sudden, in the middle of December, we had like 20 tornadoes that hit central Tennessee. It was a very quiet year right until then.
Wasn't that be the last one? The tornado that hit like this house, that was not.
Yeah, and that was the year before the April Easter tornado. So we do have about 20 to 30 yearly in Tennessee and Georgia. There's a lot of question of, are we getting more tornadoes than we ever have? That's very debatable, and for most cases the answer is no. It's just that we are detecting them more, we have more cell phones, and more people out there chasing them. But there have been many studies of trying to decide, is Tornado Alley shifting further east? And we do conclude that that is happening, that we are seeing maybe that we expand Tornado Alley to include more of Louisiana, Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, and Tennessee. So we want to make sure that everyone listens to all watches and warnings. And I think you guys know some pretty safe places to hide. So we'll talk about when it comes to tornadoes and camping here in a second. So this right here is the strongest tornado ever to hit anywhere across the world. And this happened back in 1999 in Moore, Oklahoma, and had winds of 318 miles per hour. Most tornadoes, overwhelming majority of tornadoes, are about 130 miles an hour or less. This one popped up and it had 318 miles an hour. And you can see, there it is in the background, pretty big here, 1.5 miles wide, and just completely wiped out Moore, Oklahoma, which is just to the south and east of Oklahoma City. And about 20 years later, they had one that was well over 200 miles an hour that hit almost the exact same area. Oklahoma obviously gets a lot of tornadoes every single year. I was chasing this year. I did not see this tornado, but we did come up on some of the damage that year. I did a tornado chase for the summer with my college. This next picture, I took this picture outside of Chattanooga a few years ago. And that's Kimberly there with the Salvation Army, Robert, who was at home when the tornado hit, and and his wife that was at work. And the story with this here is this is just west of Chattanooga. Robert, watching TV, saw us come on television, and we told him there was a tornado warning in Fort Marion County near Whitwell, where he was. The thing about Robert here is he actually grabbed the blanket, went in, and laid down in his bathtub. And then it was not but a couple minutes later that a tornado came and completely annihilated his house. But you see Robert here standing hardly with a scratch on his body. Was Robert lucky? Of course he was. But because he did the right thing, he increased his chances of being safe by laying down into his bathtub and pulling that blanket over. What gets hard now about tornado warnings is, I know y'all hear tornado warning, and nothing ever happens. And we are still trying to figure out, as meteorologists, National Weather Service, why some storms will produce tornadoes and while some storms do not produce tornadoes. Yes, radar technology is getting better. We can see debris and things inside those radars to give us a better idea if that storm actually has a tornado. We try to do our best to have a lead time of 10, 15, 20 minutes before that storm gets here. And I always kind of tell everybody, you never know when that one time is going to happen. You want to make sure you're safe. I think Lee Hills, getting out to Ottawa, if you ever got a chance to go out there and look at some of those houses, to find out that we only had 2 fatalities from that is unbelievable. One in a mobile home and one of a tree that fell on somebody. And that was at 11:30 at night. How can so many people make it through that? Even though you saw the amount of damage. And I think the amount of warning throughout that day, getting people prepared for that day and knowing that they were going to bed, knowing that this was a possibility. And I think a lot of people were prepared for it. Most of the time, tornadoes will catch people off guard, or they're not listening, and they're not paying attention. So there is a bit of a battle because we have more information now than we've ever had before, yet more and more people pay less attention than ever before. So we're trying to figure out, is there too much? Is there too much social media? Is there too much hype? So we're trying to figure out what is the balance there to make sure that everybody listens, okay? One of the main things here that we want to make sure we stay away from, of course, is not necessarily the tornado itself, but it's the debris that is flying around. Like a tornado is able to pick up a fork, stab it into a tree. Amazing, okay? I didn't take that picture, but I took these 2 pictures. This is this is the Easter tornado here, and that is over in Whitwell. That is a, 4x4 piece of wood that went through a car door. Really, if you were to try to emulate that and try to take a piece of wood like that and shove it through a car door, it's pretty much impossible to do. But because of the speed of that piece of wood, went right through that car door, no problem. Here you have a curb. Unbelievable that a piece of wood was able to cut through that during this tornado. So these are missiles that are flying around during a tornado. That's why we're telling everybody to stay away from the window. But the number one thing that people do when we say there's a tornado coming, grab that phone, walk over there, and try to take videos of that. And I always tell everybody, we got a lot of pictures, we got a lot of videos. Yes, we'll probably show them on television because that's what TV people do. But when you're looking through that, you have no idea what is flying around out there, which makes it obviously extremely dangerous. Okay? So what is the difference between a watch and a warning? I love this description here. Okay? Because we'll hear tornado watch and be like, well, we start closing and schools start letting out and everything. But what a tornado watch is basically the ingredients that could make a tornado. Not saying that one's going to be made, but we have the ingredients there like making a taco. Okay? So what we'll do is we'll have idea that there could be something bad happening maybe days before, and they'll put outline areas. And then during the day of when storms are happening, the Storm Prediction Center out of Oklahoma will issue a tornado watch. And usually those will come out 3 to 6 hours before storms are about to happen. That just gives everybody an idea that the conditions are favorable that a tornado could develop. And of course, a tornado warning means all those ingredients have come together to make, obviously, a tornado, or in this case here, a taco. And that means you need to find or seek shelter immediately, okay? And of course, as I mentioned, there's many ways indoors. The number one thing is always to try to stay away from those windows. We have a lot of basements here in town. Basements are a great place to go. Finding a building that's sturdy, great place to go. One of the worst places to be is obviously outside, but being in your car. Could you outrun a tornado? It's possible, but you may not know exactly where that tornado is going. 2, we have trees everywhere, so it's kind of hard to follow that tornado. Now, when I was out storm chasing, they taught us You know, before you go into the bear's cage or where that tornado could be, you always had to make sure you had exits, east, west, north, south exit, and kind of be in an area to where if that tornado were to change, you can get away pretty quickly. So, but when you're out driving around and you're trying to get away, you have no idea where it's going. There's a pretty famous video of people that climbed up underneath of an overpass. Is that a pretty safe place to be? No. But that video was widely shared, viral, and those people were lucky because they got in there, they got video of it, and you see stuff flying around everywhere. When you're huddled up under there, you're almost creating a separate wind tunnel, and all that debris is flying around, which could easily injure you even though you're up under an underpass. You probably stay dry, but you're not going to stay away from all the debris. If there's absolutely nothing else out there, one of the best places that you can actually be is laying down in a ditch. When you're laying down in a ditch, all the stuff is going to fly, hopefully, over your head. I still wouldn't want to be there, so I would try to find a very safe place to go. Running, whether it's into a restaurant or somebody's house that I have no idea. Hi, I want to become a friend really quickly. There's a tornado coming. Okay? Now, when you are outside, if you happen to be camping or if you happen to be hiking or anything like that, when it comes to tornado safety, really, there's not a lot of things you can do. But the best thing, again, is checking that forecast. If you know there's a chance of strong storms and tornadoes for that weekend, you're not going out there camping and you're not going out there hiking, hopefully. But if you cannot find shelter, your best place is to find a cave, an overhang, a ditch, which all will protect you better than being out there in your tent or actually with your hiking gear. Know the signs that a tornado might be coming. You're going to hear the thunder, you're going to see the lightning, you're probably going to have the rain, but there is going to be some stillness. That bear's cage, as I mentioned, when that storm's getting close to you and all of a sudden everything sort of stops, that's not a good thing. You have maybe a green sky. Green sky tells you two things. One, it's a severe storm, and a green sky will also tell you that it has hail in the storm. The way hail, the sunlight or light reflects off of hail, gives it kind of a greenish tint. But a lot of times when you have a severe storm and rotating winds and a green sky, that can tell you that a tornado might be coming. Obviously, rotating clouds and debris in the air. And yes, tornadoes are loud. We hear them all the time. It sounds like a freight train. When you hear that tornado spinning around, whistling around throughout buildings or trees, it makes a pretty loud roaring sound. By that time, obviously you got to try to find shelter immediately, okay? Most tornadoes here in Tennessee or this region occur between about 3 to 9 p.m. Some obviously will go a little bit later into the evening, but most of them are in that window. Lots of times in the summertime, late spring, it's really that 6 to 8 p.m. time frame, okay? Now, like I said, some of them will occur at night. And most of them move from the southeast to southwest to the northeast. So we have a lot of mountains around here. Can tornadoes go over mountains? Absolutely. As we saw back on April 27, 2011, a lot of our mountains had tornadoes that went up and over the mountains. One of the strongest tornadoes in history in the Chattanooga area rode right along the top of Lookout Mountain. And it came right down and went into East Ridge. So that does happen. And of course, if you can, try to avoid trees whenever there's a bad storm that's out there. Okay? All right. And of course, as I mentioned here, Tennessee does lead the nation in nighttime tornadoes. So always have a plan and have maybe a weather radio that you can take with you when you're out camping or hiking, or if you are within range of a cell phone tower, having a good weather app. There's a lot of weather apps that are out there. They pretty much all do the same thing. And most of our newer phones now, if you're within a tornado warning, your phone's going to go off automatically, whether you have a weather app or not. Okay? So kind of like Amber Alert. The same thing's going to happen for your cell phone. And now Hamilton County will send out text if there's a tornado emergency now. So they just started doing that again. Okay? Now the last thing here I'll talk about are just severe storms in general. Now this happens all the time. These are storms that just pop up in the middle of the afternoon or when we have fronts that are coming through. What happens is these storms will build up, and what they are literally doing is they are breathing in warm, moist air. And as they do so, they get higher and higher into the sky here. And the taller they are, they'll have most of the moisture at the very top, most of the winds at the very top, and they'll wait 15, 20 minutes and release all that at once. And that will create winds that can be 50, 60, up to 110 miles an hour. We'll call that a microburst or a downburst or straight line winds. You kind of see everything coming out at one time. Not a tornado, just one big storm that breathes in and blows everything out at once. And of course that can be very dangerous as well. So when it comes to severe storms, most of our storms that we have around here don't have tornadoes. There's probably a pretty good chance you guys will never see a tornado in your life, but of course you know we have strong storms every single spring and every single summer, okay? With strong winds and large hail. Again, we want to make sure we're listening to all watches and warnings. So we have tornado watch, we have tornado warning, but we have severe thunderstorm watch and severe thunderstorm warnings as well. And of course, when it just looks bad outside, you want to make sure you're staying away from windows. You never know what's going to be flying around in some of these bad storms. You know, trees, tree limbs, trash cans, your neighbor's cat. Who knows what's out there flying around, okay? So pretty cool video here. This has a big storm, and you can see it coming down the mountain right here. So all that rain and wind is coming out. The next thing you know, you can kind of see as it comes over the second part, all of the wind coming down that mountain right here. There it goes. So as it gets closer, it's literally like this storm is just dumping all this water and wind at one time. And what it does is it hits the ground and just spreads out. And those winds can be enough to rip off roofs, to knock down plenty of trees. And you see it just continues to re-dump water over and over again and all that wind. And lots of times when this happens, you'll feel this big rush of cold air at the same time. Because that storm has been breathing in, holding in all that moisture, wind, and hail at the top, and just blows it all out at once. So a storm just like that did this on top of Missionary Ridge. So one way you can tell whether it's a tornado or it's a severe storm is what it does to trees. So a big wind like that I just showed you will actually take the tree and literally just push the whole entire thing over, showing you the root ball and everything. What a tornado will do is snap that tree in half. So I'll get calls, used to get calls all the time, you know, Brian, we just had a tornado come through Ooltewah. There's a lot of trees that are down. And there'll be a lot of trees that look like this. Tornadoes can do this, but in most cases, a telltale sign of a tornado is ripping the trees off about halfway up. But a big storm gust like this will come in and sort of hit the bottom and pull that tree out. And that's why you tend to see trees and the root ball in its entirety blown over from a severe storm. So that's one way to tell if it's a strong storm versus if it was a tornado. Of course, the other thing we have to worry about is large hail. Now, around here in Tennessee, Georgia, you'll have mostly dime-sized hail and maybe quarter-sized hail. Every now and then, you'll have up to golf ball-sized hail. Golf ball-sized hail can put dents in a car, can break windshields. You get out to the Midwest, you can have softball-sized hail. So what is the largest hailstone to ever fall? Well, quite honestly, it just happened the last couple of years. You have back in 2018, two of the largest hailstones to ever fall from the sky. One in Argentina and the other one in South Dakota. And you can kind of see almost 18 inches around. That won't break a window, that won't put a dent in the roof, that'll go through the roof. But not very many people get hurt or really hit or impacted by large hail or injured, because when we see something like that falling, we're going to go inside. So this will actually more or less impact livestock more than anything else. We all know what large hail can do, okay? So of course, when it comes to severe storm safety, what you want to watch out for is those dark puffy clouds, abrupt changes in wind direction, and a drop in temperature. That's, you know, you're hearing the thunder, you're seeing the lightning, but one of the telltale signs that that storm is getting close to you is when storms are close, that leading gust front, that leading wind is always going to be a big drop in temperature. You're going to feel that cold wind. That tells you that that storm is really right on top of you, even just before it starts to rain, because that's that storm releasing all of that cold wind and hitting the ground at the same time. All right, biggest threat outside of a tornado is, of course, winds, and in some cases, hypothermia. You know, maybe one of the cooler months, or it's a cooler spring day and we have a big storm, you're caught off guard and you're soaked. Obviously, that's going to have an impact on your body. So you always want to make sure that you are prepared if there is a bad storm coming. You start hearing thunder, obviously you want to start putting on your rain gear before that storm gets there. You don't want to set up your tent under any sort of large branches, because with strong winds, what could come down? Those large branches, of course. And you want to make sure the best you can is securing that tent with your your stakes, your guy lines, everything to make sure that that tent is there. If you have absolutely no other place really to go, or your car is not close by, you're going to want to try to secure that tent, practice that lightning safety, and of course, obviously, staying away if we have too much heavy rain by not being in that danger zone, as I mentioned earlier. So those are some of the severe weather safety tips that we have out there. And again, as I mentioned, put on your rain gear before that storm gets there. So a couple things to be sort of as a reminder here, before you go out and do anything, is letting folks know that you're on that camping trip, you're on that hiking trip. Having a weather radio is by far the best thing that you can have. Weather radios can be sitting at the house, plugged in, and you'll hear it when there's that bad storm that's coming. There are waterproof weather radios that you can take with you hiking, and weather radios have a much better chance of picking up that weather signal than maybe your cell phone. Once you lose your cell phone tower, obviously your cell phone is no longer handy. But there are plenty of apps that are out there that can help you out too with the forecast and letting you know when there is a bad storm that is coming. So, second part of my presentation just briefly goes over a little bit about what I did the last couple of weeks. Before I get into that, you guys have some questions when it comes to severe weather or severe weather safety.
Yeah, actually,
Okay.
I really am interested in like camping, backpacking, that kind of stuff, and we've actually been in some pretty severe like lightning storms while backpacking, and really like our only shelter that we could find was under like shrubby trees, and there was like bunches of them, but we were like sitting there like we're just gonna die. This is it. This is all we have, and so in situations like that, is that like you said at some point like don't pick the only tree.
Right. So you want to try to stay away from the tallest tree or a lone tree. But really the best suggestion, is coming down from, obviously, if you're on a ridge top or something like that, you want to come down and not be on the top of anything. But yes, in a heavy wooded area, some of the more dense tree area does increase your chances, because lightning has a lot more places to choose from, and it kind of knocks down the intensity if lightning were to hit something close by. But yes, if you're standing underneath one of those big, humongous oak trees, and that's the only thing that's around, obviously that increases your chances. And getting hit by lightning is it's very rare. It's 1 in a million, of course. But it's an object that's maybe next to you that gets hit, and that current can still get very close to you, especially when it's raining. And, as I mentioned, insulating yourself, one of the best things you can do is, when you're huddled down and bent down, and they will say, there's studies out there that says even putting up your rear is the best thing to get hit instead of your head. You have more tissue down there, and it will knock the blow. No longer. So, all right. Anyone else got questions? What question do you have? Can lightning travel from people to people? So here's a true story from, I think it was Pikeville. So what happened in Pikeville was we had a storm, and there was actually I'm trying to think what it was, and I interviewed them. It was in a garage. They were working on a garage. There was a father, son, and he was in the garage door was open because it was a hot day, there was a storm coming, and that cool air was coming in. And what happened is his son was outside watching the storm. Lightning were to hit, I think, a tree or something close by, hit the water, travel on, and hit the son. It just so happened that the son was kind of leaning on the car, where his dad was working on the car as well. And the current traveled from that tree along the ground into him, hit the car, and actually hit his father as well. Both of them were okay. Both of them had to go to the hospital. But yeah, so it can travel. So, online question?
Online question.
All right.
Well, Lee Davis on YouTube. I would like to know, what do you do when a tsunami hits?
So a tsunami. So tsunami is just one big, humongous wave. So that's actually not weather. So what a tsunami is that you'll have an earthquake out in the middle of the ocean, which will create one big, humongous wave. Sometimes those are hard to detect. We have tsunami warnings that are out there. If we know there's a big earthquake that happened, obviously we were able to detect an earthquake. But we'll have tsunami warnings, we'll let people know, and the best thing that you could do is possibly evacuate. Now that'll happen maybe along the Alaskan coastline, maybe that'll happen along the California coastline is the best chances of that happening. But we have seen, especially like in Indonesia, out in Japan, we've had massive earthquakes and tsunamis that have come on and destroyed everything. We all know what water could do, and that's just one big tidal wave.
Well, tsunamis are in the Pacific Ocean mostly, and then hurricanes as well.
So tsunamis is the wave. So you're talking typhoons, cyclones and hurricanes.
How do you
So in the Atlantic we call them hurricanes, out in the Indian Ocean we'll call them cyclones, and out in the Pacific or in the Asian countries we'll call them cyclones. Just,
how do you
If you're on a boat, and when lightning hits, what would you do?
so if I'm out there in the middle of a boat and lightning was close by, so that's again, when you have, that's listening to thunder. So we'll see it all the time around here. Chickamauga Lake, we're out there having a good time. We hear thunder close by, the best thing you do is just try to take it to shore. Because you don't want to be the only thing that's sitting out there. Yes, lightning will hit boats. Yes, lightning could hit the water. So we just tell everybody to take it to shore. Thunder is the best thing to give you an idea. Because you'll hear thunder and the storm's 10 miles away. So you look up, you see the storm that's over there. All right, I'm going to try to take it to shore. I don't want to be out there in the middle. But I've been in that case, and yes, I want to take it to shore. I'm out there kayaking, I want to take it to shore. Because you don't want to be out there. So. Do what? How do you make a tsunami? So when you have an earthquake and it shakes the ground, it makes a wave. So if you're in a pool and you start shaking your hands like this, you're going to make waves in that pool. And as that wave travels and goes miles and miles and miles, it just grows and grows and grows until finally that wave or a group of waves ends up crashing onto land. So, good question. We have a question back there.
Wanted to ask, I'm not sure if you answered it, what causes the tornado? What makes the tornado start?
What makes a tornado start? So here's kind of a good example. So I've got my little clicker here. So lots of times it is when we have the right conditions and the right amount of winds, we want to make sure that we have what is called wind shear. There is directional wind shear, and then there's uniform wind shear, yada, yada, yada. So basically you have winds that are really fast up here, going in one direction, and then the winds below are not quite as fast. So when you have winds up here fast, winds down here not as fast, it makes this little column of air start to rotate like this. And when you have a storm that is developing, that storm is breathing in, and it continues to get stronger, and it will start to pull up that column of air and make it spin. And as it does that, that air starts condensing, and you start seeing the cloud cover or that funnel. So that's that funnel that starts. So until that funnel makes connection with the ground, it is just a funnel cloud. But as soon as it starts picking up dirt and debris, that funnel connects with the debris on the ground, that's when it is called a tornado. And the faster that storm is breathing in, it makes that little storm, or that little funnel, spin faster and faster and faster. If the storm is really strong, that tornado will grow. If that storm is maybe not as strong, it'll be a weak tornado, it may not last very long. Also, too, you want to make sure that that storm is moving in its entirety from southwest to northeast, so that it can continue to pull in more warm, moist air. If it just sits over the same place, it just rains itself out, and a tornado or storm will disappear. So, cool. Another online question?
Another online question. We're wondering, what do you do in a huge flash flood?
So, if we have a huge flash flood, number one thing is most of the time, that water is going to go over roadways, that water is going to maybe come into houses and things like that. So, around here, flash floods happen in, well, really a flash. So we'll have a lot of rain at one time, and that water will rise. You want to make sure you stay out of those flooded roadways. You want to make sure you stay out of those flooded ditches. Now, when we have just regular floods, like river floods, Tennessee River will flood, Lookout Creek will flood, South Chick will flood. Usually those will take a little bit longer, so you have a bit more time to evacuate. But if we were to have one sort of big flash flood, obviously it's going to hit the low-lying areas first. And usually they'll be warning like a flash flood watch or flash flood warning. So if you know you're next to low-lying areas and there's a lot of rain coming and we have flash flood watches, you're making sure that you're staying tuned to how much rain is coming and, you know, if it starts to flood. So, cool.
So if a flash flood were, first of all, how often do flash floods occur here in Chattanooga?
30 times every single year?
30 times?
30, 40 times.
And so are these coming from overflowing rivers, or this is happening in low-lying areas with rain?
Low-lying areas, too much rain. So usually in the mid-spring, late spring, we just have a lot of rain so the ground is saturated, and then we'll have a storm come through and dump all that rain. And that water has no place to go. So water will go on to what is called the path of least resistance. So that's going to go into your low-lying areas, your ditches will fill up, low roads, your creek beds will fill up, and that's where you get most of your flash flooding from. And then in the summertime, like I said, we'll have one big isolated storm that could sit I mean, this happened, I think, July here. We had one big storm that sat over outdoor Chattanooga and dumped like 7 inches. And flooding all over the place. And that's just water going everywhere. And then once it stops raining, that water starts to drain within a couple hours. And there's places like Boy Scout Road, Amicola Highway, over at East Brainerd, Gun Barrel. There's some places out there that have tendency to flood more than other locations. And then you have regular flooding when all that water runs into your South Chick, your Tennessee River, obviously be the last of the floods. But your South Chick, your Lookout Creek, and some of those will take a little bit longer for that water to rise.
I kind of have a question that's like, with flooding, flash flooding, and like all these places that you just mentioned that actually tend to be hit more, like East Brainerd, South Chick, the Boy Scout, where you said?
Yeah, Boy Scout Road,
Yeah.
not Hickson.
Is that a lot of times because of all of the neighborhoods going in and like poor ecosystems, poor drainage planning, poor neighborhood planning, poor like that kind of stuff? Because I know that's like not
Yeah.
weather, but like there's infrastructure going in and poor, I know it's outside of here, but I don't know.
So twofold.
Yeah.
I'll just say yes. Because obviously when you're taking away natural slopes and the trees and the grass and everything that soaks up a lot of that, then when that rain is on hard concrete and roads, there's nothing that's really going to stop it. So that's number one, yes, it does happen. Obviously we have retention ponds, things like that. Engineers are supposed to help combat that, and I won't speak to that, but it does happen. The other thing too is that debris that's caught in a lot of the ditches. So, we can have a heavy storm late fall or something, and that ditch is full of leaves and debris, and that gets clogged, and all that water starts pouring out everywhere. That happens on, a road next to my housing neighborhood. Everything gets stuck in there. So we ask people to clean up the ditches and clean the debris out. So that's another one there too. So yes, but yeah, growth obviously will lead to some of that. So.
Is there such thing as fire and water tornadoes?
Like water tornadoes, water spouts. So basically a water spout is a tornado over water. That's all it is. So instead of picking up dirt and everything, it picks up water and fish. But so as soon as we'll say like the Gulf Coast, you've got a big water spout that's out there, and as soon as that water spout comes on land, it is then a tornado. But there's really no difference between the two. It's just a big storm out of the ocean, ends up becoming a water spout, ends up same sort of dynamics. So fire tornado, you can have fire tornadoes. What happens is you'll have a forest fire, there's so much heat that's rising, and there's so much wind blowing around that you can have rotation, and it'll make what looks like a fire tornado. But that's not usually a typical tornado from a storm. That is just because the heat's rising and the wind's blowing so much that it's causing things to rotate. So, cool. All right. Y'all want to hear anything about Antarctica? Okay, cool. I'll do that. So real quickly, I just got back yesterday, so I only have a few pictures here from my cell phone and a couple other pictures that I borrowed from other folks here. But I want to share a little bit about Antarctica and folks at home as well. So my dad surprised me with a trip a couple months ago and said, hey, we're going down to Antarctica on a cruise. And I call it a kind of a mullet cruise, where it was party on the top and all your good food, and then business on the bottom. We had all your research and everything. But we're down there I think we're on the water from February the 10th or 11th all the way to just a couple of days ago. And what I got a chance to do is we flew down to Ursula here. This is the furthest southern city in the world, further than Australia or New Zealand, a town of about, I think 100,000 people. Very busy port that's got cruise liners, Patagonia, Chile, everything is right there as well. So we started there and we went across one of the worst oceans in the entire world, which is called Drake's Passage. We were extremely lucky because, as you see in this picture here, we have blue skies and fairly calm waters. Even though we're in the Drake's Passage, we still had waves 6 to 8 foot. Your boat's still rocking here and there as well. Oh, I think I just clicked the wrong button here. Let me go back down to it. Play. So thankfully we were very lucky with Drake's Passage. One of the reasons why Drake's Passage is so bad is because, that's why. So one of the reasons why is because there is no land that stops any of the waves occurrence anywhere across the entire world. So if you look at the world, Drake's Passage, or all the water there goes all the way across the world without anything stopping it. Plus, Drake's Passage is also the point where you have the Antarctic sea, ocean there, you have the Pacific Ocean, and you also have the Atlantic Ocean, all kind of coming together, okay? So that makes the land, or that makes the water there pretty rough. We got very lucky. Get that thing off. So where did we travel? We did not get into the heart of Antarctica because the weather is absolutely terrible and we don't want anybody going down there, but obviously there's plenty of research that still goes on. We stayed mostly in the peninsula and some of the islands here. Several different research sites and bases here that started back in the 40s and 50s, all the way to some of the research stations that are going on right now. We stayed mostly on this side because the winds tend to be mostly from east to west. There is a big, humongous ice shelf on this side, so we had to stay mostly on the west side. So a couple of things here that were on the boat that we got to play with, and some of the tools that they had, is we had boats that were able to go out. We also had Zodiacs that would take us to land and get us on shore to be able to hang out with some of the wildlife. We had a research lab that was there studying mostly plankton and krill, and they would get samples and take some of those samples back to some of the universities. So Cornell University, Western Australia, University of St. Andrews, NOAA. So these are all of the organizations that this cruise worked with. So yes, it was a fun cruise and pleasure, and we ate a lot, but there was also some research that was ongoing as well. So what we would do, so this case here, they had submarines that were on the boat. So this guy here is in a submarine doing testing, but at the same time, we have 2 humpback whales that are out there. So his goal, I don't think he achieved it, but he wanted to go down underneath and see if these humpback whales would swim by him. I don't know how dangerous that is, but so he's out there. Here we are studying and just looking at a little piece of an iceberg. What's fascinating about this is when it's snowing and all that snow is getting compressed, all the air is getting compressed as well, and you start getting little air bubbles popping up because the air is getting compressed. Those air bubbles will freeze. So inside that there, you can look in it and you can see all these frozen air bubbles inside of the iceberg. What's also fascinating too is as these icebergs are melting, you can literally stand or sit right next to it and you can hear all those air bubbles being released and popping. So it's almost like if you poured yourself a bowl of Rice Krispie treats and you hear all that cracking, that's what those sound like. Ain't nothing else out there except for maybe some wildlife, and you can hear all that cracking. There's me kayaking next to an iceberg. I got a little too close. They yelled at me because I went over there and kind of tapped the iceberg, and they told me to get away because icebergs are all very unstable. So it may have a tendency to flip over. So if that iceberg would have flipped over and knocked me over, not a very good situation. And they made me put on a pretty serious wetsuit and everything, which was pretty heavy and pretty thick because obviously the water is only about 33 degrees or so. So you don't want to fall into that. But pretty interesting that you're able to do that. Also too, it's kind of hard to see in here, but you can see within some of that ice, those icebergs and some of the cliffs that you can look into were blue. Because as ice started melting and became clear, when sunlight or light got into it, all the lights got absorbed except for one color, blue. So you would see white on top of the snow, but as it was getting compressed and melting into an ice layer, you would start to see everything turning into a blue color, which I thought was fascinating. I remember telling my dad, I want to make sure that we have a nice sunny day so you can really see that contrast. So you can see a little bit of the blue that is in it. Sorry about that warning, that's okay. So we had some pretty good lectures here. That's Dr. Dick, who has been on the Antarctic continent several times, starting I think back in the 1960s. And what he would do is he would lead dog sledding teams, and he would lead researchers out to the South Pole or where they needed to go. And he's a researcher as well, but he led a lot of people to go out and do studies, and he would take his dog sledding team that was out there. Now they don't do that anymore because obviously we got ski-doos and other ways of getting out there that's a little bit safer. But he told a lot of great stories about how he would stay at some of these huts and study areas for maybe 6 months to a year. We would take dogs down there and raise dogs and use them and for I think up to 8 years, and then he would retire the dogs in various ways. But he came on, he's from Great Britain, so he would come on and give us little lectures about some of his time out there in the Antarctic. And we'd have lectures about some of the mammals and birds, and there was a lecture about bugs. I think there's only 2 types of bugs that are out there. One of them is lice, that's on penguins. Another one is this weird looking spider thing that they're not really too sure about. Here we have what is called a sucky disc. And what they would do is you would lower that. I got a chance to do that. That's me holding it. I'll take a picture. But you would lower that sucky disc down into the water. And what that would do is measure how much plankton is in the water. And so this time of the year, the waters are just full of plankton. And then what eats plankton is krill. And just about every animal down there, give or take, eats krill. So that is the biggest part of life that is down there, are these little tiny shrimp called krill. So we would lower this down to about, I think I measured 8 meters. So it got down pretty far to where you could not see that disc anymore. And you write it down in a logbook because that's basically what's in the water. The only thing that keeps the water from being clear is plankton. There's tons of it there. But they would study that, seeing how far deep that plankton is and how much there is in it. Because the question is, with glaciers melting or more brackish water because of fresh water going into it, is that having an impact on plankton? It's debatable how much it is, but we're getting more snow down there because there's more moisture down there. So believe it or not, Antarctica doesn't really get a whole lot of snow. You go down there and you see snow everywhere, but it doesn't ever melt. But they're starting to get more and more snow, and that's causing the glaciers to actually grow in places, but also too, that can lead to a little bit more melting because you have more snow. So they did studies on that. This here is a plankton net. So we rode around in a Zodiac and drug this net behind us for about 10-15 minutes, collecting a whole bunch of plankton. Now plankton, of course, is microscopic. So when it goes down into a little bottle here, and then you end up straining that bottle and have a little collection disc about this big here, and you can see all the plankton. So you're sitting there, you're looking at it, and you're thinking, how much plankton is that? And the researcher there's a marine biologist there that was doing this with us, and there's like millions and millions of pieces of plankton that is sitting in there. Because like I said, you can't see it with the naked eye when you have that much. It's all collected. And what they would do is they would take this plankton, they'd take bottles, and they would take them back to the ship. And when we got back to Argentina, they would ship all those little, samples back to some of those colleges. We did get a chance to go on a submarine ride. There's really not a lot at the bottom of the Arctic or Antarctic Ocean. So some would say that was kind of disappointing, but the fact that you got to go down into a submarine and see things. One thing that we were trying to look out for was called the giant, what is it called, the giant jellyfish? The top giant jellyfish, something like that. Yeah, it's the large, they don't really have a big name for it, except it's a Antarctic giant jellyfish. Great name. But it is a massive jellyfish that I think has only been spotted 10 times in the world. And they had actually spotted one, I think, a couple of weeks before. Of course we didn't. But we did get a chance to see like a big yellow sponge and this big old critter that's down at the bottom that just sort of waves around and catches plankton. There's tiny little fish that are down there, but there's really not a whole lot of fish down in Antarctica. Too cold for it. Here we have an old whaling boat and all these bones, hundreds of these massive bones, because it's all blue whales. They've been there for 100 or so years back when we were doing whaling. Now we obviously can't do whaling anymore. So we have a bunch of red snow here. There's a Antarctic or a Argentinian base right there. As you're walking around, you see red snow everywhere. I thought it was penguin poop, but actually that's just bacteria that is growing in the snow. And actually turns it red or it will turn it green. So sometimes you'll see on the side green, sometimes you're walking and you'll see red. And it's actually just bacteria that is growing. There's actually moss that's down there too, where it gets just a little bit warmer. Last couple slides here. Obviously we have plenty of wildlife out there. Some of these pictures I took, some of these I borrowed. But I love this one. These are called fur sea lions. So they're back there fighting while a gentoo penguin is like, I don't care. But sea lions do not eat penguins, except for one, the leopard seal. So most of these seals here will not bother you. They can care less that you're there. You can actually walk up to them, but they obviously wouldn't let us do that. And they don't go after penguins. Most of these will eat either small fish or krill, except for the leopard seal. Now leopard seals, big huge mouthful of teeth, and they're very mean, very territorial, and they will come after you. So they did kind of give us a warning. If there's any leopard seals that are out there, we're going to keep you away from that. Did not see any leopard seals. But we saw fur seals, which had the most amount of fur on them. Gentoo penguin there. to get that warning off. But these are juvenile Gentoo penguins, and there's a little pole there that kind of kept us away from the colonies. But some of these juvenile penguins would come in and pick up the poles and move them. They're like, what is this? We have no idea. And so you just couldn't help it because they start coming up and walking to you. And within the penguin poop, you start growing some moss there. I asked them about that because that was very unusual that we have grass on Antarctica. Is that something new? But it's actually something that's fairly common down there, especially in the peninsula. We have here is a chin strap penguin. You can barely see the little black right here, but it's black and white, and it's got one solid little white line that goes right underneath it. Those are pretty hard to see. There was one colony, the largest in the world, that we could not get to because of the bad weather, but there were a couple of chin strap penguins that were mixed in with the gentoos. Humpback whales. So you see these, and you'll see them out there, and they're blowing all the water up, and every now and then you would hear them. They're actually out there talking to each other. Very fascinating. But if you were lucky enough and you could get the other side of this tail, you would see on the back of these tails, there's a white smudge. Every single one of those are different, and that's how they can tell one whale from the other. So they encourage people with these really good cameras to take pictures of the back of the whale tail to see if they've been identified. They've been able to identify, I think, some 40,000 whales by looking at the back of the tail. But you can put into a website called Happy Whale, and if it's not been detected, then you get to name that whale, which is pretty cool. I did not get a chance to do that because I don't have that kind of camera. This right here is a Weddell seal. You don't see those too often, but they're usually really white with spots everywhere. This is one that was just laying there, sleeping, and decided to have a nice yawn. This guy right here is called an albatross. Albatross. Largest bird, one of the largest birds in the world. What's fascinating about these is that we're going through the Drake Passage, and there's no land anywhere for 300, 400, 500 miles. And you have these birds that are following you, never flap a wing. They will fly up to 72,000 miles a year. They will fly up to 300, 400 miles a day. They just sit behind the boat, their wings out, and all they do is soar. Never flap their wings. Every now and then you'll see them kind of skirt across the water.
21 foot wingspan.
Yeah, 11 and a half foot wingspan. So 11 and a half, I mean, you can see how big the wings are compared to the bird there. They just sit there. And sometimes you'll see 3 or 4 flying right at you, and it looks like jets in formation flying right at you. That's pretty far away. They won't get close to you, but you see them out there just never flap their wings. And then when you got close to land, they went away. Get back out of the Drake's Passage, they show up. I don't know what they were doing. I don't know how they were staying in the air, but pretty phenomenal. A couple other pictures. We did have some Gentoo babies that were out there. Some were small, some were getting pretty big. This is called a blue-eyed shag. So it kind of looks like a penguin. That's sort of their camouflage. But they have bright blue eyes and a little bit of a longer beak. This right here is called the Great Southern Petrel, one of the other biggest birds in the world. And just so happens that while we were around, they have what are also called skuas, which look like big brown crows. And those skuas would come in, they're about this big. They fly into the penguin colony trying to steal their eggs and trying to steal their babies. And you would see some of the penguins kind of huddling together, barking at the skuas, and they're just kind of all hanging around. But then all of a sudden, this big humongous bird flies in, which is twice the size. I think it's like a 10-foot wingspan. Comes in and just grabs a penguin that wasn't doing too well, or maybe dead already, just grabs it and starts ripping it apart. It happens, but here's a close-up shot of that thing. It's like the vulture of Antarctica. Big, huge bird. You don't see them very often. There's another one of the albatross. And then on our last day, we saw not only fur seals, but we saw about 7 or 8 elephant seals all piled up together. Anywhere between 2 to 3 tons per seal. Huge things. And they're all just lined up in a row. And what they'll do is they're just sleeping and they're molting right now. So they have fed themselves and they will sit there and stay on that beach for several days. In this case right here, this guy right here was rolling on top of them. And of course, when you have 2 tons rolling on top of you, obviously that must hurt. So they started all yelling at each other. And this guy right here, this is just a humpback whale that's kind of breaching. There was one that did jump out of the water. Did not get a picture of that. I think wait for someone to send me a picture of that. So got some more pictures, but just haven't uploaded them all yet. So those are just some of the pictures of Antarctica. I don't know how long you guys want to stay, but I don't know if you guys have any questions about Antarctica that I could share.
I wanted to add to the albatross thing, just like what you're saying about how they coast on the wind. Those birds will leave their nesting places and fly around the Southern Ocean for months at a time. And I think also maybe some of the younger males who aren't going to come back to breed, like this year, for example, will actually just keep flying for like maybe like years at a time.
Yeah, it's just, they fly around and scoop up
Without
something.
touching ground.
Yeah. And they just, how they do it, like I said, when I looked that up, it was like, and I heard that in the lectures, up to 70-some-odd thousand miles a year, and I'm like, what? And then he's like, yeah, you'll go out there and they had some of the scientists out there just kind of identifying some of the wildlife. There were like Arctic terns that were out there and other shags and stuff. But he was talking about that, and he goes, I'll challenge you, you can stare at this forever, never flap his wings. You'll see 5 or 6 of them out there, and it's just, and you know, most birds are uplifted by thermals, because that's the heat that rises that keeps them flying. There's none of those out over the ocean. They're just that aerodynamic and helping to kind of float on the wind. So,
We got strong winds at least.
yeah, I mean, they got plenty of winds out there, but I'm like,
I
what
guess
keeps
not-
them up?
I guess not that day, but you.
Yeah, I mean, you're still talking even on that day, because they called it the Drake Lake that day. They called it either the Drake Shake or the Drake Lake. That was probably still 15, 20 miles an hour.
No, I've been there. I cannot believe that picture is from Drake, Massachusetts.
Yeah. So you've been down to Antarctica?
Not to Antarctica, but I was in Ushuaia and I was going to Cape of,
Yeah.
I don't, Cape of Good Hope, I guess it's in Africa. So whichever one, whatever the,
Yeah, Cape
the
of
southernmost point.
Yeah, there's another
We
cruise that'll
didn't
go.
take it because the.
Yeah, they'll go around that and go up to Patagonia and up to Chile and everything. So, yeah, they warned us. They warned us quite a bit about how bad the Drake Passage can be, and of course they've had some unfortunate incidences down there as well. But they were surprised, and I don't know if it was just them bragging or whatnot, but they were like, "This is probably one of the best weeks we've ever had now."
It was so nice, we actually got to the Antarctica. Crazy.
Yeah. I mean, you can feel it rocking and splashing, but I mean, swells 8 to 12 feet, I think, which you think it's a lot, but it's a pretty good sized boat. But yeah, they were very pleased. And then to be able to see sunshine down there, it is almost 99% cloudy every day, snow and spit and everything. But then to see it clear out and have good sunshine down there is just, you know, very rare. I think it was one of the first times I've seen, I think, multiple days the entire season. Their season is like late November to, well, last week we were the last cruise. So.
That was a National Geographic Explorer, was it?
No, my dad's explorers. They got a Viking cruise.
But there was a national or ship out there.
Yeah, I just know that they do that trip, so, and that they're all research trips too, so I wasn't sure.
Yeah, they had National Geographic, and I never did look up what the other icon was, a blue icon with an eye on it. But that ship was down there, and it was not that much smaller than the one we had. So, like I said, it was all luxury on top, Viking cruise, and on the bottom. And I mean, they had marine biologists on there, oceanographers on there, ornithologists on there. I mean, so they had a lot of those that were on there. And so, you know, they would go and get some of the experiments, get some of the specimens and bring them back. And then a couple times we made landings, you'd see all these bags and stuff. And we actually picked up a couple people from some of the stations too. So they did some of that. But, you know, did we go in there and do a whole lot of research and everything in there? A lot of it was just kind of grouping. And then when they got back to Argentina, sent it off. So probably not as much as a National Geographic, but and there were a couple, there's another cruise kind of small ship that was down there, and surprisingly, I think I saw 2 sailboats down there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So how they got down there and everything, but you know, there's really nothing that stops anybody from going down there. So by good faith, they try to keep it as clean and pristine as possible. You know, there's an international treaty that says so many people can be on land
He couldn't
anytime.
touch the ground, couldn't sit on the ground. You know, because when you're bacteria and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's very pristine down there. It's a whole different world. And the ship we were on, the Viking, was in that condition. Yeah, it's a special ship designed to go down there. We had scientists, geologists,
Yeah.
ornithologists, bird study man. We did a lot of research.
A lot of good stories and everything, so documentaries and everything as well. So it's pretty fascinating. And like I said, when you walk out, just sort of breathe that clean air, that crisp air, and wasn't that cold. It was in the 20s and 30s every day. So, and then some of the days that were really nice and sunny, I mean, you're layered up and you walk out there, and I mean, you're starting to sweat. They don't want you to sweat, but it's like wow, it's a lot warmer than what you think. But again, that's because we're up here. Because I remember my wife looking, like, it's going to be 35 degrees below zero. I'm like, that's the South Pole. We're not going there. So, and once you get, there's a lot of mountains here, a lot of mountains over here, but a lot of this is just flat. There's just nothing. So I asked a couple of scientists, I'm like, why? So they go out there and do studies, and there's a couple of stations that are out there. But
Was the sun up all day?
sun came up at 3:30 in the morning and went down about 10:30. So we're getting kind of closer to the end of the season, but yeah. But yeah, it's pretty cool. And I'll post more stuff that's on my Facebook page, so you can just search me, and I'll add more stuff to that page. And as I upload some of the pictures and get some more pictures. So, but yeah, it's pretty fascinating. But that's all I have. So it's coming up on 7:20. Y'all have any other questions? Cool. Well, I appreciate you guys taking this very, very nice day to come in here and hang out with me. Folks at home, thank you as well if you're still on there as well. Appreciate it. So, and if you have any other questions, you can post them on the Outdoor Chattanooga page. I'd be glad to answer any questions there as well. And if y'all have any other questions or anything too, and especially when it comes to our department, my card's up there as you guys walk out. Please grab my card, and I'll have all kinds of information about this or anything with Chattanooga Parks and Outdoors. So thank you. Thanks for coming out. Awesome.
Thank you.
Figure out what that warning is.